1793. The East India Trading Company had renewed its charter for another 20 years of commanding the world's key trade routes. One such route would take ships through the Great Bay of Bengal, home to the Andaman island range and its indigenous inhabitants. Along with British occupation, ancient peoples of the main island retreated into the jungles, while the smaller island of North Sentinel, for the time being, would be left isolated. Legends of its hostility would keep seemingly intrepid explorers at a distance until the year 1880. Maurice Vidal Portman, British naval officer in charge of the Andaman Islands, set out from Port Blair with a skeleton crew to North Sentinel Island. Their official intention? To establish friendly relations. Their true intention was to kidnap a Sentinelese tribesman. As the ship approached, Portman's crew began to feel increasingly tense. As their sightline of the unimaginably dense jungle became more clear, dark tales of other crews just like theirs slowly crept into their imaginations. Men being met with a cloud of deadly arrows even while offshore, and those ignorant enough to run aground unaware were always greeted with the tip of a spear. Despite their fears, Portman's ship landed safely, only to find a very recently abandoned settlement. Lucky for the crew, the mysterious Sentinelese had once again melted into the lush shelter of the jungle. To this day, the Sentinelese remain an enigma, the world's most isolated and uncontacted groups, an ancient pre-Neolithic peoples who have for centuries rejected contact. But who are the Sentinelese? Join us tonight on Into the Portal as we discuss an ancient past and attempt to unravel the mysteries of one of Earth's most bizarre civilizations, the people with no fire.
Hello, and welcome back into the portal. I'm Amber Ray.
And I'm Andrew McKay. Welcome back, everybody.
Woo, episode 10.
I can't believe that.
I know.
It's actually insane.
Just milestones all over the
We were
place.
just sitting here and I was like, is this episode 9, right? This is episode 9. And then it's like, no, it's not. It's episode 10, which is wild.
I feel like I was making that mistake before I was ahead of the game. And now
It was those 2-part episodes kept throwing us off. We never knew exactly where we were at, but
yeah.
we're stoked to be on episode 10. This is awesome.
Woo, Friday the 13th too. We're recording. Hopefully nothing bad.
Ooh, yeah, we're doing an early recording this week because we're going to the Festival.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
we'll
excited.
be shouting out Pints and Puzzles when we're at that event, that's for sure.
No kidding.
Before we get started here, you had a little bit of an announcement regarding our beloved furry friends.
Yeah, so if anyone who follows my personal account might have noticed, I put up a post yesterday just talking about our awesome cat George, who is a rescue from the SPCA. And we actually had an awesome run-in with a stray dog that we managed to safely return to our local SPCA chapter.
That's right.
And thankfully he was reconnected with his owners literally within less than 5 hours. He was such a sweetie too. I love that guy. But yeah, it's just super important to have that kind of service around. We're lucky in our society. A lot of times we take it for granted.
Definitely.
But anyways, yeah, just to reiterate, my sister, her and her husband Scott are participating in a run of champions, and they're almost at their goal of raising $500 for the SPCA, which is the charity of their choice. If anyone wants to donate, they would super appreciate it, and so would I, and of course, those furry friends we love so much. So you can go to my my Instagram, and the link is there, and yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Very cool.
But yeah, otherwise, man, I'm stoked for this one.
Yeah, me too.
This is definitely a little bit more anthropological this week.
It's kind of a different angle than we've taken for our previous episodes.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of mystery involved still, though.
Very mysterious. So we're basically going to an island called North Sentinel Island in the Bay of Bengal, which is, it's actually closer to
Malaysia
than India, but it's technically governed by the Indian government. and
As a protectorate.
So, do you want to give a little bit of a bio on the Sentinelese people? Because that's who we are looking at for this episode, because they are just absolutely fascinating.
Totally fascinating. Okay, well, I think the first thing we should say about these people is that they have been variously described as either pre-Neolithic or Stone Age. So a lot of people consider this representing an important link in the narrative of human evolution. That's why anthropologists have attempted to study these people, but pretty much unsuccessfully, I would say. And so they're basically a living ancient example of a hunter-gatherer society. They got no farming, no distinctive social structure in the form of, say, priests or chiefs or even witch doctors, like we've discussed with the voodoo.
Supposedly, yeah.
Supposedly, from what we know.
Right.
Because we really don't know much.
No.
And something else that I just want to include right off the bat is the idea that even though we're talking about the Sentinelese as Stone Age peoples, in the sense that they exist without modern amenities, I just want to reiterate here that they are by no means primitive or unable to adapt.
No.
If anything, they're probably better able to adapt than our society is.
It's just completely different than what we would be used to.
Exactly. And I think we can evidence that in that 2004 earthquake / tsunami, that they survived, and they were totally fine. They did not need help at all from the outside. If anything, I think India and a lot of those other more developed island chains were doing a couple of hours.
Yeah, no doubt.
But anyways, yeah.
So I wanted to go, we're going to give a timeline of contact, because the interesting thing about this island is that it's... sorry, you had a point there to make?
Well, yeah, we definitely want to do the timeline. Roughly the population numbers as well. I think that's important to cover.
Yeah, for sure.
Because this is a small island we're talking about. This is roughly less than 60 miles. Or no, sorry, kilometers.
60 kilometers squared.
Yeah,
right?
It was 59 point something kilometers squared. So approximately, 7 kilometers wide, 7 kilometers long.
So small.
Very small, very circular too, surrounded by a barrier of coral reefs. There's only one beach that you can land on, and that's fiercely guarded by these people.
Yes.
Unless they see something that's obviously out of their ballpark, and then they just melt into the trees.
Just disappear.
Yeah. So anyways, population, I guess we can give a rough number. What did you come across?
40 to 500.
Yeah. that was pretty much
across.
what I got to, yeah.
And it's just, the reason for that massive gap is because literally for 99.9% of the contact, air quotes, with the Sentinelese people are from a distance. Mm-hmm. And you're only seeing people on the shore. But the times that people do have been there, and we're going to go through the timeline of missions to try to befriend them, but also other contact as well. And they would see, pregnant women and lots of children and things like that. So they're thriving, obviously. Yeah. So obviously there's more than 40 individuals on an island. 40 people would be the bare minimum number for a sustaining population, really, in the long run, right?
Apparently, you can see many, many lights at night on the beaches and stuff. So that kind of points to, again, a greater population than perhaps they lead one to believe, kind of thing. That might be a survival tactic on its own a little bit. Yeah. But I think another cool thing about these people is that, like we said, they are pre-Neolithic. They are basically using bows and arrows for defense. Yep. And these long arrows, they're tipped with salvaged iron from shipwrecks. There was one in the 1980s that they're still salvaging. Apparently on Google Earth, you can still see the wreckage on the reef.
Really?
I was actually just looking around on there, and I couldn't find it myself.
Couldn't see it. You probably need,
it was just a quick glance.
Yeah. But so it's pretty wild though, because such a tiny island, but they subsist off of basically sea turtles. Mm-hmm. There's small game on the island, so there's basically pigs. like wild boar, lizards, really small. There's lizards, there's insects. And then they fish. They have basically little kind of stand-up canoes that you'll see around. They're ubiquitous around the world for shallow fishing.
Little dugout canoe type thing.
Yeah, for standing, and then you push in the shallows with a stick to kind of move you around. And I guess they spearfish from those. Right. But they also use those spears too.
I have also heard they eat honey. So they must have a good population of bees around.
Interesting.
Yeah. That's kind of bizarre. I think one of the most fascinating things that we haven't actually touched on yet is the idea that these pre-Neolithic peoples do not know how to make fire.
Right. That's the crux of this show, honestly, this episode, because...
It's the most bizarre aspect,
It's the most bizarre aspect, yeah. The idea of, pre-Neolithic in the sense that Yeah, but they're not nomadic. That's the thing, right? Like when you think pre-Neolithic, you're thinking like
Yeah.
hunter-gatherers who are wandering around and right? Like,
Right.
But these people are isolated to a tiny island. So that's really cool.
They have settlements.
And so what we wanted to get into with this episode is like, how the heck did they get here? Who are they descendants of?
Yeah.
And the stories about them relating to fire.
Why are they so aggressive and why are they so isolationist, right?
Right.
These are all questions. And yeah, the whole the fire, that's the biggest question.
Absolutely bizarre.
How did you miss that? And it's kind of curious to think that we have seen all these stories about anthropologists trying to they drop off gifts, things like candy and coconuts. They love coconuts. Apparently no coconut trees grow on the island, so that's a big thing for them.
Yeah.
And I guess some of the anthropologists there, they actually described how they would use their teeth to rip off the husks of the coconuts.
Yeah, they're that hardy.
They're very hardy, and they have a very distinctive physiology compared to other islands.
Yeah, they look very different.
Andamans even.
So to give a little bit better perspective on that then. So yeah, it's in the Andaman Island range, right? So this is just one particular island, North Sentinel Island. There is a South Sentinel, but that's uninhabited. And then there's sort of the mainland where Port Blair is the capital. And then there's an island called Rutland Island just below the main Andaman, the bulk of the island range there.
Okay.
So then their closest sort of neighbors / similar peoples are the Jarawa people.
Right.
Now the Jarawa people are they're similar in the sense that they're islanders, but they're ethnically different. Their language is different. They look slightly different.
The phenotypes are very different.
Yeah,
as far as their physiology.
Yes, which is just so bizarre. So the Jarawa people have now been sort of sadly, we see with all kinds of indigenous groups around the world, attemptably integrated with because in I think it was the 1950s, there were more Indian settlers on these islands, and this was still during British occupation, obviously. And so they would start to interact. There was sexual exploitation, obviously alcohol being moved. They're starting to drink and consume different things, and it just hasn't been good for the Jarawa.
Social issues.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, but it's interesting. So they're really close by, but they're basically totally different people. And the Jarawas would avoid the Sentinelese throughout history. The Sentinelese did not have trade with these people. They didn't have pleasantries.
Right.
Which is just absolutely bizarre.
They don't even have a shared language.
No.
Or even a similar
They're
dialect.
a few kilometers away.
Yeah.
And they can't communicate with each other.
No.
Crazy, right?
It's insane.
So do you want to get into some of the contact timeline?
Yeah. I think you had the earliest reference, eh?
Well, here's the thing. Because the problem with an island like this is we only have a certain point of recorded history, obviously. And for the most part, what we have in terms of information on early encounters with these people are from the British occupation.
Yeah.
But I did come across this one interesting point that none other than Marco Polo, who we know obviously did extensive travels, but who also reminds me a lot of a guy like Herodotus, who we've mentioned a million times, where he was traveling around and he was getting sort of secondhand accounts of things. And that's where lots of stereotypes and stories would come up, right? Because he's hearing about something that happened 100 years before, but he just happens to be there now and asking about it. But Marco Polo is supposedly single-handedly responsible for the rumor that the Sentinelese people were cannibals.
Okay.
So I thought that was really interesting.
Because I've definitely seen that come up too.
Because that rumor has persisted for a long time. Yeah. And there's been also, intruders that have gone to the island that have been killed. Yep. Whether or not they've been eaten or not is rumors. But that's where this rumor came from. He basically said the great Andamanese group. Oh, where's the quote? No.
Oh, the great Andaman.
No, I've lost it. I'll find it again.
It's funny they say that though, and how people perceive them as cannibals, because I read a story about how there was a neighboring tribe that was known for, I can't remember if it was the Ong or another one of the smaller groups that was now extinct, but essentially what they would do is part of their spirituality was after their dead were deceased, their relatives or whatever, they would actually cut up their bodies and burn the flesh so that they couldn't come back as a demonic spirit. And so a lot of outsiders saw that and interpreted it as, oh, well, they're cooking flesh. They're obviously going to eat it. But no, they were actually just doing that as part of a ritual practice.
So this is the funny
it's a
thing,
cleansing
too. It's like
thing.
we keep coming back to these things. Which was that the Drow or the Sentinelese?
No, I think it was the Ong.
The Ong people. Okay.
Or it could have been a smaller group that's now extinct. I can't remember. Exactly.
Right. Because there's been a few in that island range that are just no longer there. Like
and then that's where the rumors sort of sprang up, and then other local tribes were fearful of this, and so they kind of spread it around as a warning, and then kind of just got misattributed to the Sentinelese because they were so aggressive and so isolationist, and no one knew anything about them, so therefore assume the worst.
But here's the difference, obviously. The one point about this that's interesting, it's like, well, they don't have fire, technically.
Yeah.
So you can't really have ritualistic body burning and also the stories of lights on the beach. Obviously, that was when they happened to have it at the time, because when they go to make it again, supposedly they don't know how.
So maybe we should clarify this, because I don't think we actually... We've talked about how they apparently don't know how to make fire.
Yes.
But we have also alluded to the fact that at nighttime you can see all these lights on the island. Obviously, these are not... there's no electricity. It is fire. So what we've read in several accounts is that these people wait for a lightning strike.
Yeah.
And then they keep the embers burning for as long as possible inside the hollows of trees and things like that for protection.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where the confusion might arise if people are listening to this for the first time and be like, wait a second, you're contradicting yourself right off the bat here.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very fascinating to think that they just don't know how to make it. Maybe there's no flint. There's no, there's nothing that would create a spark.
Come on, you can make...
I know, right? You'd think. You even metal, if you're if they have...
Well, maybe, but maybe it's just because the fires that we... I don't know, maybe it's wet and dense in the jungle, so they do know how to make fire, but when they do make it, they make it at we don't see it because it's, it's tough to make where, in the dense jungle where it's wet, so they kind of are they have their methods of doing it in there, and then whatever happens outside on the beach or whatever, I don't know, it's just so strange. I came across that in a bunch of different accounts where, it was lightning strike.
But how did that information come to light? You know what I mean?
I mean, a boat positioned offshore monitoring, and there's a storm, perhaps?
Yeah. Oh, another thing I kind of lost track of in my thought about the anthropologists coming to visit and leaving these gifts of coconuts and whatever else.
Yeah.
Why aren't they leaving any matches? You think that would be pretty useful? Or would they just imagine that they wouldn't know how to use it?
You'd think they'd figure it out.
I don't know.
Or maybe a lighter, or a Zippo.
Right?
Be here's his...
And then show them, but anyways.
But then at the same time, it's it's more,
Maybe just let them figure it out.
Yeah, it's more interesting to see how they manage, than to be oh, here's a Zippo.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just very fascinating.
Yeah. Did you find that quote from Marco?
I can't find it.
Oh.
It was, but I'll tell you right now, though, it'll be in the notes, but it was basically along the lines of that they were the most aggressive and savage people that he had come across in the region.
Really?
So obviously, even back in the 13th century, they were not too keen on setting up a B&B. Let's just say that. They didn't. They killed people, and they still do. And the Indian government allows them to do so, basically. There's no way to prosecute it, right? These people, we don't even understand their language, really. Linguistic work has been slow for a lot of these people. Same with the Jarawa.
So that's why they've kind of been designated as a protectorate. There's a 3-mile radius around the island that no one is allowed to enter, even though there are people that illegally fish from time to time there, and they're taking a risk.
I'll tell you one thing, I wouldn't be fishing there, and we'll tell you why in a sec.
But yeah, very interesting, because obviously, if it's surrounded by coral reefs, therefore there's lots of fish, there's lots of natural things that would be, and sea turtles, all that.
Sea turtles and the poaching of sea turtles is the main reason why people go there that aren't supposed to nowadays.
Yeah.
But I think we should get into the timeline because it's just fascinating. Okay. So we started with Marco Polo.
We got to Marco.
More or less. So that's 13th century.
Marco
Polo. Then we're moving into the 1700s.
Okay.
So apparently, this was from a couple of different sources, but supposedly the earliest recorded mention of North Sentinel came in 1771 from a British surveyor named John Ritchie. Did you come across that?
Nope.
He basically, he surveyed the island, but he never made contact with the people. He only saw them from shore.
He surveyed it as in he was on shore doing, like...
No, like, surveyed it from a boat.
Okay.
Like, surveyed it from...
Just, like, the approximate size and location.
He was an armchair explorer on his armchair on the boat.
All right.
I guess you could say.
Rocking it.
Yeah. What else do I have here, basically? And then... I thought he did something interesting, this John Ritchie guy, but I think it must have been somebody else. And then in the 1800s, we've got a guy by the name of M.V. Portman, another British officer.
So his full name is Maurice Vidal Portman.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And
I had 2 different accounts
he
from him.
he basically found trackers in the area on the Andamanese island range who had supposedly had contact with the Sentinelese people. Mm-hmm. And so he contracted them to take him to the island, and this was the guy who basically found when
the
they got to the
Akabia
island.
trackers.
Yeah, when they got to the island, it's such a tiny island, right? How are you supposed? Like, presumably you can find these people, right? It's tiny, but all they found was abandoned villages. So they moved into the brush, abandoned.
No, it's described as freshly abandoned. So again, they're melting into the forest.
Yes, they just disappear.
Yeah.
The only people that were there. Now this is strange. There were supposedly 2 elderly Sentinelese people and 2 children that were still in this abandoned village.
Yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, so it's just...
I don't know, like, why? Like, why? You know what I mean? Like, why would you just leave
maybe
2 kids there? Like, or maybe they're like...
I had described an elderly couple and 4 youths.
Oh, okay.
So that may be a different source.
Slightly different, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we try to pull up as many sources as we can. But anyway... They were basically in the name of science. This is the 1800s. Mm-hmm. They were basically stolen and taken to Port Blair, which is on the mainland. Mm-hmm. The main island, I should say. And studied, like, for a short period of time. And basically the British way of doing things at the time was to take people away, treat them really nice.
It's almost like Pocahontas.
Yep, treat them real good. And then release them back into their homeland with the hopes that they'd, say, yeah, these guys are pretty okay. And then you swoop in and take all their stuff. When I think of it that way, it almost sounds like, kind of like, why don't you just skip that step? And if you're gonna take stuff, just go in and take it. It just seems like why? Like it's just.
Why do you need all the false pretenses, man? That's just the British way. It's like, we're so full of civilization, and
we're gonna kill you the nice way.
5 colors because that just signifies how civilized I am. But wait, no, we're just gonna take all your stuff.
So that's how it went down. And then they released them back.
After the elderly couple had died.
The elderly couple had died, like from contact with the Europeans.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunate. Obviously, if you're elderly, you're going to have a weakened immune system anyway, but the shock of that would be quite overwhelming. And then you even had the point where it's like, they brought the youths back, and they didn't hear from them for a while, like, and maybe they were dealing with disease that could have ravaged them, really.
Yeah, from those 2 kids going back, because people didn't see them for quite a few years after that.
You know what's interesting about this Maurice Portman is that, like you said, like, he... classic British methods, like, colonizer, whatever. I kind of had conflicting reports on, well, not reports, but like he definitely had some sentiments that were benevolent and were sympathetic towards these people.
Yeah.
But then I had this other quote from, oh my gosh. Yeah, basically it was just saying how he never, after his sort of, oh my gosh, what's the word I'm trying to think of? Like, they, on their journey, their mission to go get these Sentinelese and whatever, and they're on the island, and they do all this stuff. But he never actually issued a report on them after the whole expedition was over. And, and it just said, there was a quote here that talked about how he had taken a number of photographs, however, that are kept at the Anthropological Survey of India at Calcutta. But these are of little scientific value because they depict little more than just the Portman's Akabia trackers, the people he hired, posing as Sentinelese in what Portman, this is a quote here, what Portman must have fancied as typical situations such as cooking, sleeping, keeping on the lookout for enemies.
So he was just trying to...
It says here, Portman obviously let his imagination run free and allowed his Akabia poseurs to ham it up to quite a hilarious degree. Entertaining as these photographs are, the lack of any surviving report on the scientific findings made by Portman's expedition is rather unfortunate. And today, little more is known about the Sentinelese than in the 1880s. But again, So you get this, he's getting these Akabia trackers to ham it up and pose for something that's totally unlegit, so, apparently. But then on the other end, apparently he actually addressed the Royal Geographic Society later on, and he stated, this is a quote from him, he said, quote, their association, as in the Sentineles' association with outsiders, has brought them nothing but harm. And it is a great matter of regret to me that such a pleasant race has so rapidly become extinct. We could better spare many another. End quote.
Interesting.
So, yeah, like, he wasn't
just out
wasn't
for...
heartless.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's misguided, kind of, you know?
Right, and it's kind of hard to see how it couldn't be at that time, obviously.
Right.
It was sort of just the way it was.
Mm-hmm. Just the way it was, huh?
Just the way it was. So...
It's so funny, because we came across so much of this when we were in school, hey? With, like, you know, the various global attempts at colonizing certain peoples and attempts at neo-colonial methods now in, like, modern days, and, like, with neoliberalism and all this stuff, and we're not really going to get into that right now, but it definitely was bringing me right back to those sorts of ideas in my mind.
Yeah.
And it's hard to even, like, I did a post kind of hyping up this episode, and I said something about how, like, you know, like, fire is so vital to the progression of human civilizations. And it's like, that in itself is almost a false pretense, in a sense. Like, the idea that humans and their civilizations must be progressing on this linear route, like, you know, of development. Even that word development, you can unpack that one, hey? Like, it's just...
I mean...
It's full of misnomers and things that mask neo-imperial forms of power and things like that, and just, like, cultural hegemonies and whatever.
For sure.
Anyway, I'm throwing out a whole bunch of words here that are kind of
That's okay.
off the beaten track of where we're going.
I mean, this is an anthropological episode, so...
True.
I mean...
It's a lot of important stuff that a lot of people, like...
It is, and I think that it's
consider.
super... I mean, this is sort of what I wanted to end on for the episode, but I mean, yeah, it's important that these people are left alone, and for that exact reason, right?
Yeah.
For all these reasons, because it's just a precedent for everyone. Mm-hmm. And like I said this to you when we were reading the other night, where it was like, I'm almost jealous of them, like, a little bit, like... You know, like, we sit here and we stress about things that they couldn't even comprehend.
Yeah.
And I'm jealous of that a little bit. Like, it's a simple way of living, but there's something so beautiful about it, too.
Really, it is, yeah.
Not having any contact with the outside world.
It's almost like a Garden of Eden, in a sense, or it's
like,
original sin has not incurred on that part of
it's fascinating.
Even that is a false narrative.
I've got another interesting account from the 1800s.
Cool.
So 1867. So basically Port Blair and...
So that's even earlier than Portman and his expedition then.
Yeah, this was just like, well, okay, because Port Blair and the mainland was starting to be used by the British for convicts, similar to, like, Australia.
The penal colony. Yeah.
So basically 1867, there were ships kind of traveling through in the area carrying convicts, and one of them on the way back it was actually a merchant ship, but it was dropping off supplies, like, in relation to the penal system, basically, and how it was shipwrecked on a reef
really?
right just north of North Sentinel Island. So it was reported to have 86 surviving passengers, and 20 of the crewmen landed safely on the beach.
North Sentinel?
Of North Sentinel. As soon as they were attacked by the Sentinelese, and the captain who survived and made it back to Port Blair wrote that the savages were perfectly naked with short hair and red painted noses, which is not accurate, and making sounds like pa on oh. So
get away.
That's probably
what that translates
their
to.
arrows appeared to be tipped with iron.
Oh yeah.
So that's the you know.
Ooh, and that's from the 1800s.
Yeah, so obviously there were wreckages in the area prior to, the turn of the century.
That makes me think of the Chinese, because they would have had that type of technology.
Right, because that's
way
the thing.
Back.
Marco Polo was supposedly there in the 13th century, but there had to have been Chinese explorers and possibly even...
Who knows?
Like Arab explorers.
Yeah.
Like early Arab explorers.
Eastern, yeah.
Right? There definitely were people in that area going, like, checking things out way before the British and way before... Yeah. So anyway.
That's interesting that you bring up. Yeah, so basically all of them were killed off except for the captain. How the heck did he get out of there?
The captain and a few other crew survived.
Okay.
I guess he was probably one of the ones who made it into a lifeboat, and the rest swam to shore, I guess. I don't know.
The captain goes down with the ship, man.
Hey, not everybody's so honorable.
Yeah, he's like, screw this, it's a bunch of frickin' convicts. Like, no way, man.
Well, this one was a merchant ship, but still.
Sorry. I thought he was carrying prisoners.
No,
I was going to say this is perfect little lead into another account that I had.
Okay.
Again, this is like turn of the 20th century, so 1896.
Okay.
And this, when I first saw it described, I was like, this is one of the first recorded encounters. And I was like, yeah, pretty sure it's not.
Yeah.
But apparently, yeah, there was an escaped Indian convict from the penal colony who ended up, I don't know how the heck this happened. Maybe he jumped ship or something. But apparently, yeah, he washed up on the shores of North Sentinel.
You're laughing as if it's like...
I'm just going back to the reviews we found on Google.
Oh my gosh. So we go to search North Sentinel
I was
Island.
like, this would be a great vacation spot for my mother-in-law.
There's 1,600 reviews.
1,600.
And we're like, this has to be a mistake. Like, so
then
we
we start
start reading
reading
the
them.
reviews. And it's like...
Go check it out, people.
Yeah,
It's
no, you
hilarious.
have to. It's like, I sent my mother to North Sentinel Island, my mother-in-law to North Sentinel Island on a lovely vacation. I haven't seen her for a few years. I wonder how she's doing.
The one about like how they have an excellent exercise program. I don't even mind being chased down the beach by flaming arrows.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I don't know if they're flaming,
Yeah,
but
I
okay.
don't know about that.
But anyways, to get back to the story, yeah, this guy, I started laughing. Yeah, that's just my morbid sense of
A
humor.
little bit, that's okay.
So yeah, he was a convict, escaped, and apparently his body was discovered abandoned on the shores shortly later with his throat sliced, and he was riddled with arrow holes. All right, can I sell that to anyone? Anyone want to go on a vacation? Going once, going twice. Yep, and it's gone. But anyways, yeah, so that was just another little blurb.
Interesting.
That was kind of the last thing I got for the 1800s. Did you have anything
Yeah,
else
that was
for
kind of the last bit for that too. Mm-hmm. And then it's when it starts to get really interesting. It kind of jumps up to the 1960s, and this is with the anthropologist. Mm-hmm. How do you pronounce this guy's first name?
Here.
Triloknath Pandit?
Yeah, Trilokanath.
Okay, just Dr. Pandit.
Dr. Pandit, Indian anthropologist and also a director for the Anthropological Survey of India. Yeah. Very official. But he was he was the lead anthropologist, right? In this whole... He wasn't even, the way it's described is like he was sort of thrust into that spot. He didn't really even want to intrude on these people so much, but it was kind of an imperative put on him by the state.
Yeah. Yeah, like he was the son of, like, he was mixed race, I think, right? Like he was...
Half Indian and half,
he was only part Indian, and he was from an upper class family, and like, yeah, he kind of ended up just being thrust into this role, but he ended up like loving it. He was one of the few people to, I don't know if you'd phrase it as befriending the Sentinelese, but he was the closest possible thing to that. They didn't kill him.
No, he made contact.
So
he was on the island several times, lost several pairs of glasses supposedly, because what they would do is they would strip them bare, because the way he described it is like they just could not make sense of clothing, and they were just so curious. They're like, what are you hiding under there? Like, why are you dressed, essentially? So they would basically strip them down and then laugh at them because they were so silly with, their stupid clothes and all that.
Right.
And the glasses was a big thing, and watches.
Yeah.
They were like, what is that?
It's like, obviously, it'd be like...
So his group, like, they made several incursions starting in the 1967.
Yep.
Giving gifts of coconuts and iron.
And so there's really cool videos of this.
Yes.
So we'll
all
have
those
that in
are
the
going to
links.
have, on their resource page.
And up on our YouTube as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just really, it's interesting. So basically, the early expeditions of trying to befriend the Sentinelese people, like, nobody made it to shore. It was, they were,
in the surf, kind of.
Yeah, like waist
throwing
deep.
Stuff, exchanging stuff.
And that's as close as they would get. But it's so cool when you watch the video. One of the later ones where they weren't kind of grabbing their genitals and showing and doing these things that were really distinctly being like, yeah, we're not interested, kind of gestures. They had this really positive contact, but then, like you pointed out in that one part of the video where there's like obviously not an elderly woman, but like an older woman, Sentinelese woman, who walks into the water and is like grabbing the arm of like a young boy who's like so fascinated. He's like wide-eyed, like staring at these people, and she's like pulling him back into
like,
the
nope,
back to the beach and pulling him back into the jungle. Like, you can't trust these people. And it was just really interesting to see.
Yeah, that was really cool. Well, just like, it's, again, just so bizarre.
Yeah, and the whole time they're shouting words in the Jarawa language.
And they were making motions
and
to...
doing some similar gestures that they had seen before that were not negative ones.
Mm-hmm.
But they don't know if I mean, well, we do know that the languages don't cross over. What they don't know is whether or not they understand it at all. Right? Like, if they might not speak the Jarawa language, but if they may have still, over the centuries, or at least over the more recent decades, possibly been at least acquainted with it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
There was no signs to support that sort of suggestion, though.
But they had to have had contact with the Jarawa in order to outright avoid them. You know what I mean? Like, you're not. You had to know they exist in order to outright avoid them.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, the Sentinelese people probably would have moved on to some of these other islands if there was nobody else there.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
You know what I mean? There's nothing to threaten them. There's nothing to be oppositional.
They are kind of in an awkward spot, though. Like, they're pretty. The island itself is pretty isolated.
And that's that's the part. That's the interesting thing is like how they got there at all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because they don't practice seafaring practices.
No.
Like, they just hunt in the surf and around the coral reefs.
Yeah.
And don't really venture much further. I don't know. Yeah, that's... we have a whole discussion on that coming up.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so this... Dr. Pandit, he kind of... I was reading through a few articles that he had written and other people had written about him, and how there was this one instance where they were finally successful, and it took them... So they started doing this in the 60s, so 67.
Yeah.
It wasn't until 91 that they were actually able... Him and his colleagues were met on the beach by a party of what's described as 28 men, women, and children who were unarmed for once.
Yeah.
And it says... This is a quote from Mr. Pandit. He said, "They may not have chiefs, but a decision had obviously been taken by the Sentinelese to be friendly towards us. We still don't know how or why." And so it's 1991, and he made this breakthrough. And so he's kind of been the only person to sort of break through that wall. And I guess now what they do is they practice, when they go to see them, they practice the traditional Sentinelese greeting.
Which is?
Apparently, you sit in a friend's lap, and you slap your right buttock vigorously. Like,
just slap it real good.
Just slap it. Yeah.
Interesting. I'm going to try that next time we meet a friend and see how that goes.
But there were so many, like the 90s, the 1900s in particular, the second half was full of these sorts of tentative incursions by white people, well, not white people, but by outsiders.
Yeah.
And then sort of clashes. Did you have anything from I had one from the 80s. Oh, I have a little blurb here about ex-King Leopold of Belgium.
Really?
Did you come across that one?
Nope, I did not. Let's hear it.
Yeah, apparently he was just traipsing through the area on one of his big old ships. I don't know, what the premise of this was, but I guess he had the permission of the Indian government or whatever, and he had a whole royal expedition with him. And basically they landed the expedition on North Sentinel, and only to be faced by a volley of arrows. From a lone warrior, though. Apparently just one guy.
Really?
And he started just shouting, and then he gave them the, where they
they
turn around and they squat as if they're going to defecate, but
Yeah.
they're not actually defecating, and it's just a
Total,
F-off kind of
yeah,
a warning
yeah.
kind of a thing.
Terrifying, really.
Right? But they
would
made it out. They made it out.
Yeah.
You told me some story about a TV producer or something, or director.
Okay, well, supposedly... Okay, well, there was there was a bunch of trips in the 70s, like you mentioned. So, there was a trip in 70, 74, another one later in 74, 75, 77.
Oh, that was the Leopold of Belgium. That was 74.
Yeah, okay.
Apparently.
Right. So it was on
include
one of these trips where these early videos were taken, the ones that we will show. It's kind of grainy, you can tell it was shot in the 1970s.
Yeah.
I don't know if this is true or not, but I have this one article online that said that on one of these trips, they were however many yards off of shore, and one of the cameramen got hit in the leg with an arrow.
Wee.
And it just reminded me of the Ace Ventura When Nature Calls, where he gets speared in both legs, and he's like, ah. on either side. Of his
They
leg.
just started laughing at him.
Yeah, and I know I'm laughing at this guy's expense. I'm sure his leg was fine, but
He made it.
hopefully.
He's okay.
Anyway, I thought that was funny though.
Sorry, what year was that again?
That was in the 70s.
Okay, so again, another 70s.
Yeah.
Then there was the 80s. Rockin' the 80s.
We're just going through the decades here. Come
Well,
on, guys.
really?
Get
Oh,
up with the
yeah.
90s.
Yeah. I had that funny, it was the Primrose. That was where that ship just got grounded on a coral reef.
Okay.
And they were stranded at sea for a few days before being rescued by, I think it was a helicopter came and got
Okay.
them. But after a few days, the captain and his crew started to observe that there were small, this is a quote here, there were small black men were carrying spears and arrows and building boats on the beach to attack them with. And they kind of had a little bit of a skirmish clash, and eventually, yeah, they were picked up by a helicopter. But yeah, it was just and after they had actually got rescued, the salvagers that came in to remove the wreckage, again, they clashed violently. And they were scared. Like, these salvagers were terrified. Like, they were requesting to the Indian government for, like, firearms and stuff for protection. And apparently the requests were denied initially and all this
Really?
stuff. And because they were obviously trying to look out for the North Sentinel. They're like, you
Yeah.
guys, like, I don't know. But yeah, very, yeah, just terrifying, really. For both sides, though. Could you imagine how, like, even, yeah, it would be mind-boggling to come across some of these, like, modern amenities and technologies that we have from the eyes of a
Totally.
Sentinelese
it would
person.
Be, yeah, just alien. Yeah, just alien.
Out of this world.
Yeah. So we were gonna move on to some other accounts and like through the sort of timeline of contact. But before we continue, I thought we would stop for a little break, a little promo break.
Let's do it.
Okay, cool. So
Yeah.
we are
For our friends, Zanger and Ellie,
Yeah.
over at Zang This Podcast.
super fun show.
It's really fun,
The
yeah.
banter is pretty awesome.
They're a cute duo.
And yeah.
So yeah, if you like comics, they talk about comics, video games, movies, so much more. We're actually really excited because we're going to be part of a roundtable discussion coming up in the summer.
God, I can't wait. Yeah.
So yeah, we're going to be on the show with them, so it's going to be really fun. So you guys should check it out. And if you like it, please subscribe. They would
Absolutely.
appreciate it. And yeah.
All right,
more
guys,
here.
let's take a little listen to Zang This.
Are you a fan of movies?
Or comics?
Or video games?
Or just anything else nerdy?
Well, you should check out the Zing This Podcast. And that's spelled
Zeng.
this. And you can find us every Monday. And we have nerdy topics from comic book reviews to in-depth analysis of iconic nerdy movies, as well as video game discussions. Where's some of the best places to find us, Allie?
Well, Podbean, of course.
You can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play,
Anywhere else you listen to your podcast. Yeah.
So check us out. Once again, that is
Zing
This.
And we're back. Wow, that was an awesome little promo there. And
Yeah,
go check them out.
definitely.
Yeah. So we just have a few little wrap-ups, I guess, for our timeline of contact.
Yeah.
And just like, noteworthy events in the area, things like that.
Definitely.
So we kind of covered the 1990s.
Which was the most profound decade of contact. 91 was
Exactly.
where Dr. Pandit was able to make the deepest contact, so to speak, into
Deepest
the island.
inroads, yeah, exactly. Slowly breaking down those barriers.
Which is
but
cool.
it's interesting because, yeah, like he is definitely of the mind that these people should probably be left in isolation.
Just left alone. So, and they have been since then. So, I mean, the dropping mission, like the gift dropping missions,
They've stopped.
they stopped. It's illegal to go there.
Exactly.
Poachers still will end up in the area, but they're not supposed to be there, and people have gone to jail for it, and I've got a story about that too. But we were going to mention the 2004 earthquake,
Yeah.
and
That was a huge event for the area. Like,
Yeah.
it killed, I think, upwards of 200,000 people.
over 200,000 people. Yeah, it was
And-
crazy.
Exactly. And, like, yes, huge devastation. There was a massive seismic uplift of several islands and coral reefs,
Coral reefs. Yeah.
including the North Sentinel Island. It was very dramatic and very visible from
Yeah.
satellite images in the days after. And even the island itself has changed dramatically.
Right.
Like, the Sentinelese were fine. Their settlements weren't. The river was completely destroyed that they used.
That's just it. It's like, it was amazing. So that's earthquake and tsunami happen. And then once things had settled down, the Indian government sends choppers to basically just check on them.
Just rescue
just
operations.
to see if any of them are still alive.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, I mean, the one story that I had pulled up here was that a lone Sentinelese tribesman, started shooting arrows at a helicopter.
There's a famous photo of that guy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I think it's the closest shot of a Sentinelese person that we have to date.
Other than
film.
the stuff like handing the coconuts in the 90s or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe close of where he's fully armed, ready to go.
Exactly. Like you can see
ready.
he's got the arrow locked and loaded and ready to roll.
I did see a few other photos too, but where there was more than just the one.
Yeah.
But basically that was the story. A lone tribesman was out there shooting arrows at a helicopter, and clearly they had survived a tsunami on an island that is really small.
And it was also clear that they did not need or want help.
No, obviously not.
They did not.
Clearly they did. Unless, I mean, that's just it though, getting into like the mythology, their mythology potentially or whatever. It's like, what do they see a helicopter as?
Right?
Like now that it's, at this point in time, 2004, they had seen planes before going over, right? They'd seen cargo ships.
Yeah, huge
But what
freighters.
are you thinking about these things? Do you think that the storm was brought by machines or creatures such as like the chopper that's
Maybe
flying
they thought
overhead?
we're the cause of it. Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. So anyway, that's kind of interesting.
That
but they
is.
did survive. They're which is just,
And then less
impressive.
than 2 years later, we get this other instance where there was the two fishermen fishing illegally. It was Sundar Raj, age 48, and Pandit Tiwari, which was aged 52.
Yeah.
They were fishing for mud crabs, again, off of North Sentinel. And they
Fell asleep.
They decided to drop anchor,
Yep.
which their version of anchor was a rope with a rock tied to it.
Yep.
And thought it was secure enough, was not secure enough,
Nope.
and aided by a heavily induced sleep caused by alcohol.
Yep.
Massive quantities of alcohol from what I read. They basically did not wake up in time.
No, so they drifted in. Their boat ends up
slowly-
drifting into North Sentinel Beach.
Into the surf. And there was, I read accounts where there was other fishermen from afar that were yelling at them, were trying to get them to wake up, but apparently they were just too drunk.
Just.
Well, I don't want to say that and have it not be true, but that's what every article I read said.
Well, that sounds pretty
So,
likely. I mean,
yeah.
it's 2006. They're chilling on a boat. Mm-hmm. That sounds about right.
Fishing illegally.
So, yeah, lo and behold, these two guys didn't get to go fishing the next day.
No.
Because the Sentinelese, got to them.
They volleyed them with arrows, as in their
they-
usual.
Yeah.
And then there was that other thing where there was a brief rumor going around that they had actually eaten these two people.
Right.
Eaten. And, and they were actually found, like, the helicopter that went in to sort of check on their remains and check on the boat that they found on the beach. I guess, like, I don't even know what you would call it, but like the wind generated from the propellers of the helicopter revealed, like, it washed the sands off of the bodies,
Right.
and they just saw them. They were on the beach. They're dead. They're just they weren't eaten. Nothing.
No.
So again, just
Not
collapsing
cannibals,
that,
but just
that rumor.
And the question is this just something that they're killing them because they're outsiders and then burying them on the beach just to get them out of the way, or did they think, or are they reminded of a time when perhaps disease had spread from some sort of unwanted contact, and so they bury the bodies because they can't burn them because they don't happen to have a lightning strike that's still burning at the time to use. So anyway, but those two guys didn't make it, and basically the family members of these two fishermen, they weren't even upset at the Sentinelese.
Really?
Like, they were not mad at them. They were basically like, look, they shouldn't have been there.
Yeah.
They floated in. It's unfortunate, but that's the way she goes. Like, basically North Sentinel Island is for all intents and purposes considered a sovereign state. They don't have statehood, but essentially they are. I mean, they're immune to prosecution. You can't
Exactly.
prosecute anything. How would you? So
How would the concept of justice even be conveyed? You know what I mean? Like, they would just be
right.
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 It wouldn't make sense.
Absolutely. So anyway, the
If anything,
family
that's
was
justice, right? you invade a foreign country and its people, you better expect to have
Well,
some
and then
hostility.
absolutely. So I came across this other dickhead who basically has been hunting for that's called spade to spade. That's exactly what he is. He's been to jail 9 times.
Oh, the turtle
And
guy.
the turtle guy. I have his name too. I was just gonna slander this dude. But basically, he had been arrested 9 times for poaching sea turtles in the bay, and illegally entering the tribal reserve of the Andaman Islands. He just keeps paying the fines. He goes to jail for a few months and then gets out. And basically, this is like the perfect example of how like the Indian government is clearly not that concerned about protecting these areas. They're sort of just half-ass.
It's more just like lip service.
Yeah, like they're not really.
Maybe they don't have the capabilities though too.
Well, possibly.
Like they have a coast guard,
I mean,
right? But how often could they be circling around?
Right. Yeah, I know, right? But 9 times this guy. So what I'm saying is, next time he gets caught, I think we should just
Strap him to a board.
Yeah, tie him up on a board and just be like, I'm sorry,
Ace
sir,
Ventura
but
style.
we're unfortunately having to extradite you to the North Sentinel so they can proceed with their own prosecution, which will essentially just be a spear to the back of the head. But
Boom. There you go.
because that's just kind of like, that's literally one of the few resources they have. And if you're just going back 9 times and not getting hit with arrows just miraculously, I think they should have a chance to for some target practice. Yeah. That's just me. That's
They're
just me.
excellent marksmen.
Yeah.
So. Oh, man. Yeah, so that kind of wrapped it up for me as far as finding modern day contact.
Yeah, that's kind of the end of the timeline. There hasn't been a lot since.
I think they've just kind of... There was a master plan put forth by the Indian government. This was in 1991, and I think that they've significantly backed off especially since the earthquake. But even before that, there was an instance with the Jarawa again, where there was a skirmish and there was a lot of bad PR, and they were just like, you know what? Yeah, we need to stop doing what we're doing, because it's again, like, it's this lip service of good notions and you know, like all these intentions, and
Exactly.
and it's just kind of one of those things where I hope that doctor, that was his name, Dr. Pandit, I hope he has his way, because he basically was of the mind
Just
again,
wants them to be left alone.
yeah.
There's actually a website called survivalinternational.org, which is where we pulled up a lot of the information on the Sentinelese people.
You can donate.
You can donate, and you can also, they have it like queued up. I did it myself earlier, where you can just click a link right from their website, and it's already all basically filled in for you for a letter to the Indian government. Basically basically just being like, asking for better protection of the Sentinelese people. And you can do that for other basically endangered peoples all around the world, because there's indigenous tribes in the Amazon that are on the verge of extinction and things like that too. So I thought that was kind of neat. So go check out survivalinternational.org, because they've got some cool resources on there.
Sweet.
But
For now, I think it'd be cool to dive into some
kind of ideas, theories.
Some ideas, some theories, some science. Like, I have some notes here on like an estimated history of these people in the area.
Go for it, Amber. Let's get into it.
So basically, DNA analysis. I was reading a few different peer-reviewed articles about this. A lot of the language is above my understanding, but I can get the main points.
Right.
So basically, there was DNA analysis of the neighboring tribe, the Garawa, that we've discussed already. And this basically suggests that the islanders and much of the sort of archipelago... Oh my god, I'm totally saying that wrong.
Archipelago?
Archipelago! Yep, archipelago. A lot of these people kind of... Either they came in a mass migration approximately 60,000 years ago. This is the late Pleistocene era. This is supported by their physiology and, of course, the mitochondrial DNA samples.
Yeah.
So I also have some clues that are less scientific that would sort of point to they're inhabiting these places for a really long time. And again, we're coming back to sea turtles for this. So these sea turtles have adapted to avoid the inhabitants.
Right. So cool.
This is something not seen anywhere else. Like, you went to Hawaii and you were swimming with sea turtles.
Yeah,
and they're
like I
totally
accidentally
tame.
headbutted one because it was swimming above me, and I was like down below, and then I like pushed off the ground and like to go up, and I bonked my head underneath one, and it hurt, and I was like, what the heck? But no, that was at the Hanama Bay like reserve. And they're not intimidated by humans at all.
So that kind of suggests, some people, this isn't me suggesting, this is the scholars, suggest that the turtles have adapted over a long period of time to avoid the natives because of the danger they pose to them in hunting them and all this stuff. So there was that, and then there's also the fact that their language is so utterly incomprehensible to even the neighboring tribes. So that suggests, again, that they've maintained hostile isolation for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years, which is really cool.
Very cool.
So again, there's all this...
Sorry, did you give that number? 60,000?
60,000 years ago, approximately, was when they migrated out of Africa.
Right.
And I had another article that was talking about, like, the more regional differences of the Andamanese Islanders and stuff like that. But again, it suggested that the early colonization was throughout Southeast Asia and is indicative of phenotype similarities with African groups of that time, about 60,000 years ago.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
I explained that right? So basically, they came from Africa and sort of migrated along these coasts along East Asia. Or is it East Asia or West Asia? West Asia, sorry.
Yeah.
Southwest Asia from the Indian coast and into, say, Malaysia and where they are today in the Bay of Bengal.
Okay.
But again, yeah, it's just this... It says, basically, this is a quote here, it says, all lines of evidence, social, cultural, historical, archaeological, linguistic, phenotypic, and genetic, support the conclusion that the Andaman Islanders have been isolated for a substantial period of time.
Yeah.
Substantial meaning thousands of years.
Yes. Tens of thousands, potentially.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this is the thing that's interesting to me. You know, how'd you get there?
That's just it,
because, yeah, people obviously migrated out of Africa, and, you know, there were ways of, moving north, basically, right? Like, and we talked about this during the Zerzura episode, too, like, where migration patterns went into Europe, and then from east to west in Europe, or which direction it went, and there's been some debate as to whether or not it actually was east to west in terms of human migration, but, like, these people don't have seafaring boats. And my question is if you're so isolated, you don't have influence from outsiders, you don't have people, like, unless there is some sort of undocumented disease where they died off and came back and, like, knowledge was lost, you'd think that there would be a part of their oral tradition or whatever tradition, knowledge of seafaring boats.
Right.
Or knowledge of anything. Like, you know what I mean? It just seems bizarre that they wouldn't want to venture out, like,
and that's
after they had used it to get there. You know what I mean?
Maybe there was some sort of spiritual ethos or mythology that was basically making them feel as though they needed to stay in this one secluded area. Because it's all conjecture, right? Like, we don't know what the thoughts are of a Sentinelese person.
No.
We don't know what their religious concepts would be,
I just
se,
want
or
to
spiritual
be a fly
concepts.
on the wall so bad.
Oh,
how cool would that be?
That we
but this is what I'm thinking. It's like, this is why we need, like, that little fly drone, so we can, like, it can just be a fly, that literally a fly on the wall that goes into the jungle and lands on a tree and can get some footage, because that would just be so cool.
And even anthropologists today, I saw discussions about how they're considering using these, like, ultra high tech microphones that they can use from boats, and basically it'll catch the language being spoken on the beach, and then they can use that to take it back to their whatever, where they do their analysis in safety.
Yeah.
Without
not gonna get shot in the leg.
Yeah. And then that way they can maybe start to try and piece together some sort of comprehensible analysis of language and some sort of way to... But if they can't even do that with the Jarawa, I feel like it's a bit of a...
Might be a bit of a stretch.
Yeah.
Like, because here's the thing, because it would take... You'd have to be there. Like, part of, like, linguistic anthropology is, like, actually physically... Yeah, the context and the physical gestures and things like that to, like, go along with it, right?
Right.
So it would be so hard to decipher a language from a lab or, like, from an office listening to a recording. But obviously it's still better than not hearing it at all, because
true.
and you can make comparisons to the Jarawa and people that can actually be physically contacted.
Yeah.
But at the same time, how helpful is that going to be? Because they were separated from the Sentinelese for so long. Like, they were not,
they're not
partners
really
or connected or anything.
Exactly.
Which is just totally bizarre. And, like, we do find this in some other places. So I just had this example of tribes called the Yuri and the Passe in the isolated Colombian Amazon.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And basically, sort of, it's a misnomer to call them uncontacted because they obviously have been contacted, and most of them were killed off during the South American rubber boom.
Oh.
So basically a century ago.
Okay.
And now it's from cocaine traffickers and, people logging in the rainforest and stuff like that. So their groups are super small, but they are essentially isolated in the same sense that the Sentinelese are. But because it's not an island, they just have to keep moving further and further and further back into the jungle,
Yeah.
which is kind of sad. But
Man, what about, like, I'm trying to think here. I wonder what the top, oh my gosh, the top elevation of the North Sentinel Island is. Because, there's, like, all these islands that are endangered by the fact that these sea levels are rising so rapidly these days. I wonder how they would fare, say, in, like, 50 years or, like, 100 years from now.
I wonder.
So I'm thinking, like,
how high up
it's
can
nice
they
to be
go?
isolated by water until that water starts rising.
Yeah,
And then
no
I think
kidding.
I'd rather choose jungle then, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
So, I mean, where are you at, like, with this? In terms of, I mean, it's sort of hard to say theories, really, because we know that they came from Africa around 60,000 years ago, their descendants, and that they've been there for a really long time. They haven't interbred with other islanders.
They're just existing, man. They're like the last snow globe
Right.
civilization. I find it really fascinating.
So cool.
I don't really have any conclusions per se, other than the fact that I feel like everyone that is listening to this right now, don't book a vacation there. Don't try and befriend these people.
That's not gonna work
You're not
out.
going to do them any favors or yourself.
No.
That's basically all I can say.
Yeah.
And it's just really sad because, like we said right off the top of the bat, 40,000 were estimated to be around on these island chains before the advent of colonization and the
Yeah.
British arriving and all this stuff.
Yeah.
Again, by 1850s, we're back to about 5,000.
Yeah.
And now today,
500.
there's less than
Supposedly,
500, about
yeah.
400 Aboriginals left. And that is an estimate that can include the Jarawa and the Ong. And there's basically, it started off with about 10 different distinct tribes in this island chain, the archipelago? Oh my god, I am sorry.
You suck with
I'm not
that
even going to
word.
say that. Anyways. But yeah, no, basically what I read was that 7 out of 10 of them are gone.
Right.
And I saw estimates too, like there were some of these tribes, yeah, they're basically extinct. They've got like 13 members left.
Yeah.
So,
Which
just
is
really sad.
It is
And
sad, but I have confidence in the Sentinelese people to remain isolated. I think
Yeah,
that the
they're
closer
rocking it,
that
man.
our civilization gets to collapsing because of the economic dependencies and different things that we have in place right now, it probably won't be
limitations that
within
we're
our
far
lifetime.
exceeding.
But when civilization does eventually kind of, which has always happened throughout history, every single major civilization collapses eventually. The Sentinelese people will still be chilling.
yeah,
They'll be chilling on their island.
chilling, unless their island's underground or underwater, I mean.
Yeah. Now, here's an interesting thing. I hope I don't make anyone angry with this sort of theory or anything like that. But when we were looking into isolated tribes,
I'm already angry.
One of the stories that came up was the Michael Rockefeller case in Papua New Guinea.
Oh, yeah.
Where he disappeared trying to quote unquote contact remote headhunting tribes.
Right.
And then
Why
later
the
on,
heck would you be doing that?
because the story goes that his family had opened a museum of like primitive art and
he was an art collector.
this was his way of basically getting into the family fortune. He was like, I'm going to go the academic route. I'm going to be an anthropologist or whatever and go to Papua New Guinea to obtain artifacts to bring back for the museum. Mm-hmm. Anyway, he disappeared. The story goes like he was with one other person in the boat, offshore.
The boat capsized and it was rough seas. And apparently, according to his companion, Michael's last words were, "I think I can make it."
Yeah.
Referring to the shore. And he decided to abandon the boat, and the other guy stayed on, and he was rescued later on by a helicopter.
Yeah.
And then, essentially, the official narrative was that he had drowned.
Right.
And then
But
they
now
started
we
to
know
uncover
that it's
information.
not how it happened.
Yeah, and
there was actually a tribal chief that was interviewed later in the 70s who told reporters that he was the one who killed Michael Rockefeller.
Really?
Yeah, and it was just a routine thing, like the way they always the way it would be, because he had not befriended them. He was basically in there thinking money could buy everything, and was just bringing back artifacts for the museum.
Not to say that he was just
No, he wasn't.
like chucking money out at everything.
No,
like,
no,
he seemed very
but he did,
genuine in his attempts.
He was overconfident.
Overconfident, yeah.
Overconfident.
What year was that?
That was in the 60s. I think 66, I want to say.
There is an episode of him on In Search Of with our friend Spock.
Yeah.
So,
anyway, I don't think I finished that thought, though.
You didn't,
was
sorry.
Where was I?
You were going to just make a
Where's
comparison.
the train of thought? Oh, right. Yeah, so looking for remote peoples in New Guinea.
It's derailed.
And derailed, God. Okay, what episode are we on here? It's episode 12? But, okay. Now we're just all over the map. Okay.
Finish your thought.
Finish the thought. So, there was a cool story that came out of that, an adjacent story to the Michael Rockefeller, that some of these tribes he was attempting to contact claimed to be one of the lost tribes of Israel. And they still claim to this day, and Judaism is being practiced by a large group of people in Papua New Guinea, which is absolutely bizarre. What? Right?
We kind of came across this during the Zazura episode, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So anyway, it's just kind of a fun idea, but could the Sentinelese or the Andamandese people potentially have a link to this as well? If we don't know exactly why they're there, how they got there, we know where they're from, but we don't. That's 60,000 years ago. We don't know the rest of the history.
The tribes of Israel were not 60,000 years ago. That was about 3,000 years ago, wasn't it?
No, I'm just saying, is there some sort of a connection to these people? Is there some sort of
to the people that claim to have a connection to the lost tribes of Israel, and then the Sentinelese? That's what you're
I'm just trying to come up with a theory as to why they're so hostile, other than just the idea that they had early contacts with Europeans and some people got sick. Is there some sort of a reason why? Are they guarding a secret? Are they? They're different than the Jarawa. They're different than these other people who were just as exposed to disease and exploitation, but they're different. They have a different response. Sort of similar to how you would say the headhunters of Papua New Guinea are pretty hostile.
Yeah.
I guess that's the connection I'm trying to make.
Okay.
And I just thought it was an interesting thing with Michael Rockefeller going in there. It's just a famous case or whatever.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I guess the timelines don't match up. But it's just an interesting... It's just, are they guarding something? Is there something about them that they don't want people to find out? You know what I mean? Because why would the Jarawa be... Is it just because of location that they would be less hostile?
Well, when you look at it on the Google map, it's they're definitely a lot more central. Yeah. A lot easier. How big was the Jarawa Island again?
Well, the Jarawa were on the mainland too.
Oh, yeah,
it's quite large. It's larger than the space for the Sentinelese
the
people.
Red Skin Island, the Manglutan. Sorry, I'm just looking at Google Earth now.
Yeah. Anyway, I suppose the timeline doesn't match up for that, but I just thought it was interesting because it's obviously a group of super isolated people.
That's very curious. You know
what I mean?
I really have struggled with this extreme hostility. I just feel like it has to have something to do with their spiritual ethos. I feel like there has to be something there that dictates. Obviously everyone's ethos dictates how they live their lives, but theirs in particular has to have some sort of... Either they consider anything off the island... could you imagine... I'm just trying to think, what if they consider North Sentinel as Earth, and everything else is extraterrestrial to them?
Right.
They're existing on their lonely little planet that's about 60 kilometers big.
And when they see another person that doesn't look like them, it's
they think it's
almost
a different
the
race.
other. It's the other.
Yeah, it's the abject.
Yeah.
Where it's
uncanny or whatever.
Exactly. I don't identify with you.
Right.
And therefore, I'm just trying to picture it from the side, I'm going at it from a UFO encounter type experience, right? Where it's completely outside your realm of conception. Maybe and we did touch on that again, right, with the helicopters and the technology that we have in modern day and how that could be so alien.
Maybe the Sentinelese have been subjects to abductions, and that's why they're distrusting of helicopters and things.
You never know. Fascinating stuff, though. And just right off the bat, when I discovered these people, it was on the pretense of the people with no fire. And I was just immediately I needed to know more. And yeah, it really grabs you, this story.
It does.
And I really hope the best for these people.
It's one of those things where it's like, I wish I could see them. But at the same time, that would obviously just be contributing to like the tourism, which is destroying
it's almost
the
like
Andaman
a
Islands.
contamination or something.
And it's like, you can just imagine how it would have been so adventurous for, the wife of a British governor in India in the 1880s or whatever, being like, you can go see the last tribe of uncontacted people.
Yeah.
It's a big industry, you know what I mean? And that's one of the sad things with the Jarala. That's what it is now. It's basically just an industry, tourism, and
the pitfalls that they've encountered by sort of joining into our modern society is just it does parallel for me a lot of what's occurred since colonization and contact with like North American indigenous with Europeans and whatever is a lot of it, especially with the alcoholism, the social issues, that type of thing.
Those are definitely the crossovers.
And the fact that they are obviously on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum for the most part.
It makes you want to go. It makes me want to go just live in the woods.
Yep.
Like I'm sort of jealous of these people. Like I said before, like I just think they've got a pretty unique way of life.
Man.
Like none other on Earth anymore. Even the tribes in the Amazon and in New Guinea, it's just not the same.
Not the same.
So anyway, I guess we're going to wrap this up.
Yep.
Thanks,
I hope
everybody.
You guys enjoyed this.
Yeah, we hope you enjoyed this sort of slightly different style of episode.
It basically had no paranormal elements.
No, it was
besides us conjecturing about aliens.
Yeah, I mean, but it was just we're going to be coming at you with more like this too, because we want to get into history and anthropology as well, and we will hopefully have some interviews lined up with some people from UBC that we're trying to line up.
Yep.
But just so cool, the idea that people can be left uncontacted. And I feel like, just to finish this off, just to tie in a tiny bit of paranormal to it, you could use the same sort of thinking when we've applied to the Sentinelese people and their isolation when you're thinking about looking for a Bigfoot or looking for certain things. I mean, these are a specific human that is pre-Neolithic, that has remained isolated and survived without any of the stuff that we've dealt with over the centuries.
Yep.
And if that can happen with a group of humans, then why not?
What else is possible in this world, right?
Yeah.
And on that note, until next week. Well, as always, though, we would just like to thank our listeners and our supporters. We have so many of them. We're just really grateful.
It's been growing. The show's been growing since we started, like every week, and it's all thanks to you guys. So you're amazing. Please pass it on to friends and family. That's the best way for the show to grow, is just word of mouth.
Yeah, so, personal recommendations go a long way.
So challenge somebody to listen to a podcast.
Yeah.
Or listen to something weird if they don't get into weird stuff. That's what we're here for.
Yeah, so reach out to us on Twitter. We have,
at Into the Portal 1 and at Amber Ray 1992. And then
as well on Instagram, we have our Into the Portal podcast, I believe is our handle. And we should probably know that right off the bat.
Probably.
Yeah, and then just look out for the blog post coming at you sometime this week, and lots of fun stuff. Like we're trying to experiment a bit. There's gonna be some YouTube stuff happening the next little bit. So
should we give a teaser for next week? Our episode that's coming out next week?
I don't know. Should we?
Okay, I think we should. We're doing an episode with Mad Scientist Podcast. Woo! So we're stoked. We're teaming up with Chris and Marie from Mad Scientist, and so that's coming at you next week. So stay tuned for that.
Woo.
So thanks again for listening, and we'll catch up with you guys in about 7 days.